Begin the Gemara today towards the top of the Fain Gimel, third line from the top. The Gemara continues different halachas here, b'negeya to an oral. We spoke before, the Mishnah at the beginning of this Perek begins with the halacha of an oral, whether you can eat truma. Then it speaks about the halacha of an oral by a korban Pesach, which we learn out from there to a truma. And now the Gemara brings a question regarding another case for an oral. The question was asked from Rav Sheshes, Oral ma'u b'maiser. Oral, is he allowed to eat maiser? What's the basis of this question? Do I say, just like I learn out Pesach from maiser le'inyan aninas, regarding this that an einon cannot do a korban Pesach. By maiser, the pasuk says beferish that you can't eat maiser if you're an einon. Again, an einon is a person that's relative passed away on that day. So he cannot eat maiser. The pasuk says le'achalti ba'oini mimenu. So from there I learn out the korban Pesach that an einon cannot bring korban Pesach. So maybe so too I learn out in the reverse. Yalef nami maiser mi Pesach linyan areilus. I learn out maiser from Pesach that just like a korban Pesach it says oral yechalbay. So to by maiser you can't eat maiser as an oral. So do you learn them from one another? Or maybe no, I don't relearn it in the reverse because chamor mikal yalef. Korban Pesach, which is a carbon, and it's much more stringent. So therefore that I can learn out from Meiser, which is much lighter. So that as we always, you learn out if you find a chumrah that an einon can't eat, even Meiser, which is lighter, for sure, Korban Pesach, which is more chomer, that an einon can't eat the Korban Pesach. So that we could learn out. But kal mechomer lo yalef. But to learn out Meiser, which is much lighter, from Korban Pesach, which is much more stringent, how could I learn that out? Meiser is lighter, so therefore I could say that over here an oral could eat it. So Tosfos actually points out that what the Gemara says now to explain why you can't learn Meiser from Pesach is so logical. Why would the Gemara even think to say that you could learn it out? So Tosfos says that the Gemara is not sure because if it's taka based on a kal v'chomer, if we're learning Pesach from Meiser based on this kal v'chomer, obviously you can't reverse the kal v'chomer and learn out Meiser from Pesach. But Tosfos says, the Gemara was thinking maybe this that we learn out Pesach from Meiser is not a kal v'chomer. Maybe it's really a gzeira shava. There's a pasuk mimenu. Maybe there's a gzeira shava, and if it's a gzeira shava, then it doesn't matter if it's a kal or it's a chomer. Gzeira shava means you compare the two. So just like I compare to learn from Meiser to Pesach that an einon does not eat Pesach, maybe also in the reverse. The gzeira shava teaches me that I learn also from Pesach to Meiser that an oral doesn't eat Meiser. That's the Gemara's question there. Amalahu, so Rav Sheshes answered them. Tenisua, we could learn this based on a Mishnah. And here the Gemara brings the first Mishnah in Masechta Bikurim. The Mishnah there says, so the Mishnah there begins to discuss things that you find that Truma and Bikurim have the same halacha, in contrast to Meiser that does not have these halachas. And the Mishnah gives a list of things. HaTruma v'Bikurim. So when it comes to Truma and Bikurim, chayavin aleim misa. So first thing is that a person that's not supposed to eat the truma or bikurim, if he does, he's chayiv misa. So this is whether he's a zar that eats the truma, whether it's a kohen that's tameh that eats the truma. So you chayiv misa b'dei shemayim, v'chaymesh, and also a zar that eats truma b'shaygig, so he has to pay back the principal plus another fifth. Again, so these are all halachas that do not apply to a ma'aser sheni. And then v'asurin lizarim. Truma and Bikurim, any zar is not allowed to eat this. This is really included in what it said before, that you'd be chayiv misa and a chaimish. So this is also not a halacha by Ma'aser Sheni. By Ma'aser Sheni, any person brings his Ma'aser Sheni and can eat from it. And also, again,
Ma'aser or Ma'aser Sheni?
We're talking here about Ma'aser Sheni. And also, v'hei nichse kayin. When it comes to Truma and Bikurim, which you give to the kayin, it becomes the kayin's money. It's his possessions. He can do it whatever he wants. He can be mekadesh a woman with it. He can buy with it whatever he wants. It says it belongs to him. And by Ma'aser, though, a person cannot use his Ma'aser Sheni for his own personal needs. Ma'aser Sheni you have to bring to Yerushalayim, and you have to eat it, to drink it, or there's only three things you can do with Ma'aser Sheni: achila, shtia, or sicha. Eat, drink, or use it as an ointment, but can't do anything else with it. Another thing you find by Truma and Bikurim, va'oilin be'echad u'meya. If it gets mixed with something else, so how does it become bottle in that mixture? Only if it's 100 against 1. By Maisa though, you don't have to have so much against it. It's just batal beroiv. If it's the majority of b'chulin against it, it becomes batal. Another halacha is only by truma and bikurim, v'tunin echitzas yadayim. Before you eat it, you have to wash your hands. So this is based on a halacha that we learned many times, that a person's hands have a halacha of being sheni l'tumah. So therefore, if you're going to touch it, it's going to become shlishi l'tumah. So therefore, you're not going to be able to eat the truma or the bikurim. Whereas by maisa though, maisa does not have this level of tumah, and therefore you can eat it even without washing your hands. And the harev shemesh. And the final halacha is benigeh to truma, that you can't eat truma. If you went to the mikveh, you were tameh, you went to the mikveh, you have to wait until the evening to be able to eat truma. Whereas by meiser, you can eat right away. So that's the list that the Mishnah gives, and it concludes regarding all these halachas, masha ein came b'meiser. By meiser, none of these halachas apply. So now coming back to the case of an odel, whether an odel could eat meiser or not. If you're going to say that the halacha is that an odel is allowed to eat meiser, and we do not learn out from Korban Pesach, so if so, nisni odel asa behen, so why doesn't it say also that an odel is not allowed to eat truma? That's the first halacha of the Mishnah in this Perek, that an odel doesn't eat truma, and that applies to bikurim as well. Bikurim is compared to truma, as we see here, and Rashi brings the pasuk. The pasuk refers to truma with the words trumas yodecha. So both by truma and bikurim, an odel cannot eat truma, but by meiser he can't. Mashenkim b'meiser, an odel could eat meiser. So why doesn't it bring another distinction between them? So this proves to you that that you do learn out from Korban Pesach that an odel can't eat meiser, just like truma and bikurim. Answers the Gemara, it's no raya. Tana v'shayir. The Tana here gives you this list of comparing things that truma and bikurim are the same and not by meiser, but it leaves out some. It doesn't give you the full list. Fragt the Gemara, umay shayir, the high shayir. What else is it leaving out besides this one point of an odel that you say that the Tana left out things? So this is a question the Gemara asks many times when it brings this kind of an answer, because the Tana would not just leave out one case. If he's already bringing you the whole list, he wouldn't leave out one thing. If he leaves out 2 or 3 things, so then you can say that the Tana didn't say the whole list. So the Gemara wants to know, what else did the Tana leave out that you're saying that this is not a full list here? So the Gemara answers that really you're right in the Reisha. The first answer of the Gemara here is that in the Reisha, it didn't leave anything else out. But if you look there in the Seifa of the Mishnah, you see that the list that it gives in the Seifa, it leaves things out there. Now in the Seifa of that Mishnah, it has a different type of list. So Shayir, again, my Shayir, the high Shayir. Shayir, the Katani Seifa, he leaves out in the list that it gives in the Seifa. What is the list of the Seifa? So here in the Seifa, it brings a list of things where Meiser and Bikurim are the same, and Truma is not. So yesh b'meiser b'bikurim, you have halachas that are similar by meiser and bikurim, mashenkim b'truma, which do not apply to truma. What is the list over here? Sham meiser v'bikurim. So number 1, meiser and bikurim tunan avas makim. They have to be brought to Yerushalayim, and that's not a halacha that applies by truma. Truma you can give to a kain. There's no halacha that has to be dafkin Yerushalayim. Utunin vidui, and by meiser and bikurim, in the 3rd year after Shemitah, so you have to be mizvada, you have to confess, and you have to tell the Eibishter that I gave all my meiseres for the last years, and that includes the bikurim as well. So that's the second halacha, which is, again, this does not apply to truma. There's no vidui by truma. And va'asur la'aynon, and by meiser and bikurim, an aynon is not allowed to eat meiser. So an aynon is not allowed to eat meiser. I mentioned before that's a beferish pasuk. Le'chalti ba'ayni mimenu. And the Gemara will soon bring a pasuk that you learn out that bikurim also you're not allowed to eat when you're an aynon. But Rab Shimon matter. This last point, Rab Shimon does not hold that by bikurim an aynon can't eat. He says an aynon, a kayin, could eat bikurim. Another thing that meiser and bikurim are compared, v'chayavim b'bir. Both of them have to be burnt and taken out from the house, and to be burnt you have to get rid of them. If a person did not give the meiseres in the proper time when he was supposed to, in the 1st year, the 2nd year, the 3rd year of the Shemitah, when it comes to the 3rd year, he has to get rid of all of it and he has to get it out of his house. That applies to meiser and to bikurim, but not b'nigeya to truma. V'Rab Shimon paiter. But Rab Shimon says that by bikurim this does not apply. When it says biur in the pasuk, biyarti min abayis, we'll see soon, the Gemara will bring the psukim, that does not apply to bikurim. That's the list that the Mishnah gives in the Sefer to compare meiser to bikurim. these halachas and not by truma. Now, the Gemara points out there are other things that Meiser and Bikurim are the same and are not by truma, and the Mishnah doesn't mention them. Now, however, also levayer mehen betuma. This, that when it comes to Meiser and Bikurim and you have to get rid of them, you have to burn them, you can't burn them when they are tameh. It's only when they are toher. And Rashi brings here the psukim that the Gemara soon will bring the psukim. We'll see. Okay, so when it comes to Meiser and Bikurim, you can't burn them and have anah from them when they are tameh. By truma though, you could. If your truma becomes tameh, what does a kohen do with truma that becomes tameh? Truma a kohen is supposed to eat, but a truma that becomes tameh, you can use it for fuel, for a fire. You could burn it when it's tameh. That does not say in the Mishnah, even though that's another case, another halacha. Another halacha that the Mishnah skips, v'oichlan betumas atzman loike. And if you eat the meiser or the bikurim, not when the person is tameh, but when the meiser or the bikurim are tameh, so then he gets malchus for this. And that's a halacha that applies only to meiser and to bikurim, mashen kim betruma. And that does not apply by truma. By truma, if the person himself is tameh, he's not allowed to eat the truma. But if he's tired and the truma itself is tameh, so then there's no malchus for this. He does not get malchus for eating the truma. The Gemara will soon bring that he's not allowed to eat the truma when it is tameh. You have to burn it, but there's no malchus though for this. So it doesn't mention this distinction either. So what do I see? Alma tana v'shayir. So I see that in this Mishnah, at least in the list of the Sefer, when it's comparing Maisa to Bikurim, it doesn't give you the full list. So we could say it is similar in the Reisha, when it compares Truma to Bikurim, Masha Enkim by Maisa, it also is not giving you the full list. So there's no raya regarding the case of an Odel by Meiser. Okay, the Gemara will soon give a second answer, and it'll show that even in the Reisha of the Mishnah, it also skips two halachas in the comparison of Truma to Bikurim. But before the Gemara brings that second answer from Rav Ashi all the way at the end of the Yamud, the Gemara here and the rest of the Yamud will go through this Mishnah to explain the sources of different halachas that were mentioned here in the Mishnah. It starts actually be'ikir with the machlokes here between the Tanna Kama and Rab Shimon, whether an Einon, a Kayin, an Einon, whether he's allowed to eat Bikurim or not. So the Tanna Kama said he's not allowed to eat Bikurim, like Meiser, and Rab Shimon said he's allowed. So the Bach is guided here. Omar, it said over here in this Mishnah that Vasurin lo Einon is not allowed to eat Bikurim, but Rab Shimon matter. And Rab Shimon says that you could eat Bikurim. Minaluhu, what's the source for this? Well, where does the Tanna Kama hold that you cannot allowed to eat Bikurim when you're an Einon? Because the pasuk says leisucha lechol b'sharecha meiser the gancha v'sedoishcha v'tzerecha v'gaimet trumas yedecha. So mentioned in this pasuk together, it talks about meiser, and then it talks about trumas yedecha. When it says in this pasuk trumas yedecha, what is trumas yedecha? V'amamar trumas yedecha elu bikurim. When it says trumas yedecha, it refers to bikurim. How do we know it refers to bikurim? Because it's talking about eating it b'sharecha, that you're not allowed to eat it in any of your cities. You have to bring it to Yerushalayim. That does not apply to truma literally. Truma, you can eat it anywhere. So because it talks here about the fact that it has to be brought to Yerushalayim, so we know that trumas yedecha is referring to bikurim. And it mentions over here the meiser and the bikurim in the same pasuk. So therefore we learn from this, ve'iskish bikurim lemeiser. So we're comparing now bikurim to meiser. Ma meiser asur lo. You know, just like by meiser, the einon is not allowed to eat it. As I mentioned, the pasuk says le'achalti ba'einim imenu. Av bikurim asur lo einon. So to bikurim, einon is not allowed to eat. That's the Tanna Kama. Rab Shimon says that no, you're right. Taka in this pasuk itself. When it says bikurim in this pasuk, what's the terminology it uses to refer to bikurim? It refers to it as trumas yedecha. So Rab Shimon says, instead of comparing it to meiser that's mentioned in the pasuk, look at the terminology that the Torah uses right here regarding the bikurim itself. So Rab Shimon says, Trume karinu rachmana. When the Torah refers to the bikurim with the term trumas yedecha, so it's called trume, and therefore I compare it to trume. Ma trume muteres lo einon, just like trume, a kain that's an einon is allowed to eat it. Av bikurim mutel einon. So to trume is allowed for an einon. The next thing it said in the Mishnah was v'chayavin b'biur, that you chayiv to do biur for the trume and the bikurim. V'Rab Shimon paiter. Oh, sorry, let me say that again. Yechayiv in the beer for the meiser and the bikurim, that is, and not by the truma. And Rab Shimon paiter. Rab Shimon says that for bikurim you don't have to do the beer. So the Gemara explains why not. So it's again the exact same thing of the argument that we just said. Whether you compare bikurim to meiser or you compare bikurim to truma, it's the same thing over here. So Mar, the Tanakame, Makish, he compares bikurim to meiser, as we just said. So therefore, regarding the halacha of beer that applies to meiser, it applies to bikurim as well. Umar loy makish. And according to Rab Shimon, as we just said, you don't compare bikurim to meiser, you compare bikurim to truma. So truma does not require any beer. So to the bikurim does not require beer as well. Then it said in the Mishnah, v'aser levayer mehen betuma. You're not allowed to burn it. You're not allowed to get rid of it when it's tamei, to use it and to burn it when it's tamei. And v'oichlon betumas atzman. And if you eat it, if it's tamei itself, meaning if the bikurim or the maisa itself is tamei, loike, you get malchus for eating it. So minalon, what's the source for this? Right, so these two things were not mentioned in the Mishnah itself, but this is what the Gemara itself brought. These two halachas the Gemara brought. The Gemara said that the Mishnah skipped these two halachas. So what's the source of this? So the Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, it says, Rab Shimon Oime, Lo biyarti mimenu betame. When it says in the pasuk, Lo biyarti mimenu betame, which is the pasuk that it says regarding the maisris, that a person says, I did not use it, I did not burn it when I was tame. What does this mean? Bein shani tame v'hu. Whether the person says whether I myself was tamei and the meiser was tahir, so I did not eat it when I was tahir. Bein shani tahir, or if I was tahir v'hu tamei and the meiser was tamei. So here I see that you're not allowed to eat meiseres that are tamei, and whether the person is tamei or whether the meiseres are tamei. But in this pasuk though, this is not a lav. This pasuk is just the pasuk saying over here, b'nigeya, to what a person says when he confesses, when he says what he did with his meiser. And the person says, I did not eat it when I was tamei, I did not eat it when it was tamei. So I see from here that you're not allowed to eat it when it's tamei, you're not allowed to eat it when you're tamei. But v'heichad muzar al achilasai. From where do I see that a person is warned that he's not allowed to eat it when he's tamei? So again, the point is that this pasuk is not a azhara, it's not yet a lav, it's just stating a fact that the person says, I did not do this. But where does the pasuk say a lav, that you should get malchus for this? So the Braisa says, Eini yedeya. Eini yedeya, I don't know. Where is there a source? So the Gemara stops, this is the Gemara interjects here, and the Gemara asks that Tumas Aguf behed yiksiv be, regarding a person that he himself is tamei, the fact that he's not allowed to eat from the meiser, that it says clearly in the pasuk, Nefesh ashetiga boy v'tama da'orev, that a person that sees tamei, so then v'lo yoichal min hakotchim ki im rachatz b'sarei b'mayim. So he's not allowed to eat from kotchim until he goes to the mikveh. When it says here kotchim, so Rashi brings from the Gemara later that kotchim does not refer to kotchim literally, but it refers to meiser. So in this pasuk it says that if a person is tamei, he's not allowed to eat from meiser. So that the tumas haguft, if you're tamei, so that it says clearly. So the Gemara says, Hachi kami bayaleit. The question that the Braisa was asking is, Tumas atzma minayin. How do you know if you are toy, but the meiser is tamei? So how do I know that if the meiser is tamei, that there's a lav that you're not allowed to eat the meiser? Tamid loima. So the pasuk, we go back to the pasuk that we mentioned before. So it said, that you're not allowed to eat the ma'aseh sheni anywhere in your cities. You have to bring it to Yerushalayim. That was the pasuk we quoted before. So it uses the term do not eat it in your cities. Now there's another pasuk where it uses the same term of a bisharecha. In another pasuk it says bisharecha teichleno, in your cities you can eat it. Hatamei v'ator yachtov. What is that pasuk talking about? So Rashi over here brings that pasuk is talking about psulei hamukdashin. It's talking about a b'chair that became a balmum and it's pasul, it's kachim that's pasul. What happens with this kachim that's pasul? You redeem it from hektish, and once you redeem it from hektish, any zar, any yid could go and eat from it. And in that pasuk it's telling you that once you redeemed it from hektish, so now if you have a part of this meat and some of it is tamei, some of it is tar, you can eat it together, just like you would eat any other meat, you can eat it when it's tamei. That's in the pasuk. Again, that pasuk is speaking about hektish, that what became pasul and you redeemed it, so you can eat it tamei and tar together. And what does that pasuk there teach me? Even a person that's tamei and a person that's tar are eating it together on the same table, and even bekaira achas, even if they're eating it in the same plate. So you're putting the tar meat and tameh meat in the same plate, ve'enan chayshishin, and they don't have to be concerned because it was already redeemed. It's not hektish anymore. So therefore, even if the meat that's tameh makes the meat that's tar tameh, but nevertheless you can eat it. So that's what it says in that pasuk, that b'sharecha techlano, that they're allowed to eat it even though it became tameh. But now what do we learn from this? From this we learn to the other pasuk by Meiser, where it also uses the term b'sharecha, and there it says leisucha lechel b'sharecha. We learn out v'kamer achmana hahu damri lachasa b'sharecha techlano. In that pasuk regarding the psulei mikdashim which you redeemed, so over there I'm telling you that in your cities you're allowed to eat it, even if it becomes tameh. It's in one plate with other meat that's tameh. You can eat it. Hacha, but in this pasuk by Meiser it says lo yisucha lechel b'sharecha. What is the pasuk saying here? That you cannot eat it when the Meiser itself is tameh. So this is the source, this is the lav, that you're not allowed to eat the Meiser which is tameh. You get malchus for this, but this is only by Meiser and by bikurim, which is compared to Meiser, but not by truma. By truma, there's no malchus for eating it if it's tameh. Okay, the Gemara continues. Masha'en kain be truma. So we said that by truma, the halacha of being mevayer. So there's two halachas we said here. Number one, regarding this, that you're not allowed to burn truma when it's again, you're not allowed to burn meiser and bikurim when it's tameh. But by truma you are allowed. Truma that became tameh, you can use it as fuel, you could burn it and have anah from it that way. So mashenki b'truma, that's what the Gemara was saying, that truma does not have the same stringency as ma'isa and bikurim. From where do we know this? Minalon, Amar Abavo, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Makra, because the pasuk says, Lo biyarti mimenu b'tameh. I did not burn this, the ma'aser or the bikurim, when it was tameh. So because it says the word mimenu, I learn out mimenu yatamavir, that only the ma'aser and the bikurim you're not allowed to burn it when it's tameh. Aval yatamavir shemen shel truma shenitma. The oil, if you have oil from truma that became tameh, so even if you can't use it to eat anymore because it's tameh, but you can use it as a fuel, you can burn it, you can use it for fire. That's what, because it says mimenu, that's where I know that truma doesn't have this chumrah. For Gemara, how do you know that this exclusion of the word mimenu applies to truma? Maybe say that you're not allowed to use the ma'aser to burn it when it's tameh, but you can use oil from kachim. Let's say you have from a carbon mincha, you have oil from kachim that became tameh, and that you're allowed to burn and use as a fuel. Maybe that's where we learn out to. Says the Gemara, no, that's not what the exclusion could be going on. Why not? Lav kavachaymehu. Isn't it a kavachaymer that this stringency should apply to kachim? Well, not meiser akal. If when it comes to meiser, the kedusha of meiser is much lighter than kachim. Amra Torah, there the Torah says loy biyarti mimenu b'tamei, that I did not burn it, I did not use it when it was tamei. Kaidesh, chamar, so kachim, which is much more stringent, like kol shekeh, most definitely you're not allowed to burn it when it's tamei. So we have a kavachaymer. But the Gemara right away asks, the exact same kavachaymer applies to truma as well. Ihachi, if so, truma nami kavachaymehu. Truma should also be a kavachaymer to learn out from meiser. So truma has a higher level of kedusha than meiser. Truma could only be eaten by a kayin, meiser to any zar. So you make the same kavachaymer regarding truma as well, that you're not allowed to burn it and use it as a fuel when it's tameh. The Gemara says, no, but aksiv mimenu. We had before a pasuk, an exclusion to say that we have to exclude something. So we're putting it on truma. That truma is allowed to eat, or not allowed to eat, sorry. It's allowed to be used to burn as a fuel when it's tameh. So now the Gemara asks, we had this similar kind of question before, Umare Isa, what is it that you see to learn this way, to say that kachim, I learn a kavachaymer, to say that definitely kachim is more stringent, and therefore you're not allowed to use it as a fuel when it's tameh? But by truma, I say that no, it's mutter to use it as a fuel when it's tameh. How do you know to learn it this way? Maybe to do it the reverse. Says the Gemara, Mistavre Kaidesh loy mimayitna. It's logical to say that when it comes to Kaidesh, I'm not going to exclude it from this Isser, I will include it in the Isser, because Kaidesh is more stringent than Truma. And the Gemara brings over here all the different chumras that you find by Kaidesh. What are those chumras? Shekain, and the Gemara first says it in a Rosh Tevis, Penkachs. What is all these letters of this Rosh Tevis? Pigul. Kachim has a unique halacha of pigul. When a person brings the Kayin brings the carbon, and he thinks that he's going to eat it or use it, shaloi bizmanoi. Naisar, the halacha of Naisar that applies by a carbon. That's the Naisar of the Naisar carbon. And a carbon, or maybe carbon second. Carbon is a separate chumrah. fact that it's a carbon, maybe that's what did they say over there? Is it a separate chumrah? The fact that it's a carbon, it's a separate stringency that is brought as a carbon on the mizbeach, yeah? And then mi'ila, another chumrah that kachim have is, which is the fact that anyone that derives benefit from kachim, so there's the halachas of mi'ila, you have to pay back with a fifth or with a carbon. Kares, also if you eat from kachim, so then you chayiv kares for this, unique stringency from for kachim. And v'aser la'aynon, and aynon is not allowed to eat from the kachim. So these are all the chumras that you find when you get to kachim. So therefore it's logical to say that this chumrah, that you're not allowed to burn it as fuel when it's tamei, applies to kachim. Says the Gemara Adarabba. On the contrary, I'll show you that there are certain stringencies that the truma has. Truma loime ma'itna, do not exclude truma from this isser of burning the fuel when it's tamei. Shekein machpaz. What are these chumras of machpaz? Misa, that if a huzar that eats truma, so he's chayiv misa b'dei shemayim. V'chaymesh, and he also has to pay an extra fifth if he eats from it, b'sheigig. Ve'ein la pidyon, truma is not something that could ever be redeemed, as opposed to kachim, that could be redeemed. V'asura l'zarim, and a zar is not allowed to eat from truma, whereas by kachim kalim, it could be eaten by a zar, the owner of the carbon, which is the Yisrael, he eats part of the carbon. So you see that there are certain additional chumras that truma has that kachim do not have. So maybe truma is more stringent. So the Gemara gives two answers. Number one, hanoch nefishin. The chumras that we just pointed out regarding kachim are more in number than the ones that there are by truma. So therefore, truma is not as stringent as kachim. So we learn out that kachim is the one that you're not allowed to burn when it's tamei. Or another answer is kares adife. The chumrah of kares is above the other ones. The fact that the kares is an einish, which is much more chomer than any of the other chumras, and therefore that shows that the chumrah of kachim is stronger. Okay, then now the last point the Gemara will explain regarding the Mishnah that we quoted before, or regarding actually the omission of that Mishnah. The Gemara pointed out, V'oichlan betumas atzmon loike, when it comes to meiser and bikurim, if you eat it when it's tamei, not when the person's tamei, but when the meiser or the bikurim is tamei, so you get malchus for this. Mashenkim betruma. By truma, you don't get malchus if you ate the truma when the truma was tamei. So the Gemara now points out what this means is milki hu deloilaki. You don't get malchus for eating the truma when the truma itself is tamei, but ha'isure ikke. But that means that there is an issa to eat truma when it's tamei, even though you don't get malchus. Minalam, from where do I know that it's aser? So the Gemara says, Amakra, so the pasuk says, Bisharecha teichlenu. The pasuk we quoted before regarding the kachim that was pasul and it got redeemed. So in that pasuk it says you can eat it even if it's tamei. So it says that you eat it. That means only the kachim that was redeemed after it was pasul, that could be eaten when it is tamei. But there's an exclusion of another case, which is the truma. Truma is not allowed to be eaten if the truma itself is tamei. But not as no malchus for this. Why not? V'lav abba meklal asay. This is a lav that you deduce from an asay that it says. So therefore it's only a essa. That's the rule of any lav that comes from an essa. Okay, let's just conclude the inyan of here till the end of the sugya. Now the Gemara, going back to the beginning of the inyan, as I mentioned, the Gemara brought this whole Mishnah of Masechta Bikurim to try to prove b'nigeya to a oral whether a oral is allowed to eat meiser or not. And I wanted to prove from this Mishnah that a oral is allowed to eat meiser, because it didn't bring it in the list. In the Mishnah, when it brings the list to compare Truma to Bikurim. And the Gemara's answer was Tana v'Shayir. What was the Tana v'Shayir? In the Sefer. Now the Gemara is going to bring it up. Ashi says, even in the Reisha, in the list where it compares Truma to Bikurim, it also leaves over things in that list. Rav Ashi says, Mereisha nami shamit mina, the Tana v'Shayir. Even in the Reisha itself, it also leaves over things. Why? Midelaika Tani, in the Reisha of the Mishnah, it did not say when it was comparing Truma to Bikurim, not, which is halachas that do not apply to Meiser, v'nayagim b'shash nei shavua. So it could say regarding Truma and Bikurim, they are both halachas that you have to give Truma and Bikurim, they are applied, or they exist all 7 years of Shemitah, or not Shemitah itself, but all 6 years of Shemitah. Every year you have to give Truma and Bikurim. And by Meiser though, Meiser Sheni we're speaking about. When do you give Meiser Sheni? Meiser Sheni is only in the 3rd year and in the 6th year. It's not in all of the years. Again, let me say that again. Meiser Sheni is not Noyig in the 3rd and the 6th year. Right? In the 3rd and the 6th year, you give Meiser Ani instead of Meiser Sheni. So Meiser Sheni that we're speaking about here is not in all the 6 years. So that's a unique stringency of Truma and Bikurim, and the Mishnah skips it. And another thing the Mishnah skips is Ve'ein Lahem Pidyon. When it comes to Truma and Bikurim, it can never be redeemed. Mashenkin b'maiser, on the other hand, by Maiser Sheni, one of the most basic halachas of Maiser Sheni is that you redeem your produce and you bring the money to Yerushalayim, and then you buy with that money in Yerushalayim food and you eat in Yerushalayim. So because the Mishnah that is skips these two halachas, so I see that I can't learn out from this Mishnah. So Shema know that this Mishnah is not a full list, so I can't learn from here regarding the halacha of an oral eating Maiser. We'll continue trying to bring other ayahs to this, as we'll see.